The answer.
When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity, this afternoon at 2, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
Dan, and in for Amy this morning, Kristen McQuarrie from the Chicago Tribune Ed Board, and President Trump called in to Trish Regan last night over at Fox Business. Had honestly, a painful 20-minute interview. Oof. But I digress. They covered a number of topics, obviously Barr's testimony yesterday, but also the situation in Venezuela. Secretary of State Pompeo suggesting that Maduro was ready to abdicate, but the Russians told him to stand pat. Pompeo also saying military force to depose Maduro is not off the table, which is, press always makes more of that than it is, because an administration never publicly just rules out options, right? Because you just don't know how things are going to play out, and they don't want to tell you everything that they may be thinking based on different contingencies. And President Trump had this to say about Maduro's future.
We haven't seen a scene like this in many, many years. And when you think how wealthy this country was, Trish, this country was one of the wealthy countries, not just there, but this was one of the wealthy countries of the world. And now you look at what's going on, where they don't even have food, where they can't get water. The water is filthy dirty, and people are getting sick. It's terrible. It's really a failure of socialism, and I don't know, maybe this is beyond socialism, but this is socialism, and you see what happens. Now they're talking about it for our country. I can't believe it's real, when you hear some of the things being said, but they're talking about socialism for our country. That's not going to happen, especially with how well we're doing.
So he didn't really get into specifics. He more just sort of empathized with the people of Venezuela suffering under the oppression of Maduro. Guaido was also on with Trish Regan, and basically just reiterated what you've seen happen in Venezuela, that they believe this is the moment to breach the gap and force Maduro to abdicate, or, take him out, Mussolini him, who knows, but that an increasing number of soldiers from Venezuela's military are defecting, and it's sort of a now or never moment. And boy, never will be pretty bleak for Venezuela if Maduro is able to stay in power. For more on this topic, as well as the deep state, since that was a hot topic yesterday per Barr's testimony on the Mueller report, we're pleased to be joined again by Bill Gertz, senior editor for the Washington Free Beacon. He's also the author of the book I War and Peace in the Information Age. Bill, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, good to be on the program.
Why don't we start with Venezuela, and what are realistic options for the United States with respect to supporting Guaido's revolution?
Well, it's a pressure campaign, and basically the U.S. is committed. I know President Trump has told his advisors that he's prepared to invoke the Monroe Doctrine, which says, look, this is our sphere of influence. On the downside, there's not a lot of history of leftist communist dictators being peaceably removed from power. That being the case, though, the situation does seem to be accelerating a bit. My big concern is that we're seeing support from the Cubans, intelligence-wise, as well as the Russians. And I think the strategy there is to try and break the Monroe Doctrine, to say that the United States would be unable to oust this leftist regime in Venezuela.
What is your position just on the U.S. getting involved, providing resources, versus military action to actually force regime change? Are you more Rand Paul, or are you more military? You want to see
John
military
Bolton.
intervention? Yes, there you go.
Yeah, no, I think I support the assertive help. Let's help the Venezuelan people. I think that it would have a tremendous impact, not just regionally, but globally, too. I think we should do the same thing toward Iran and North Korea as well, to try and help those populations. Again, if we had a real strong information capability, we might be better off, but we don't have that. The government's information operations have been very weakened. And the other hand, we see the communist states and authoritarian regimes are very good at disinformation and using information as a weapon. So it's a challenge for free and open societies to do that kind of activity. But I think if we build up our information power, we would be better prepared to deal with these kinds of crises that we see in Venezuela today.
Well, what kind of information do we have on Guaido? Because we've been down this road before, and it doesn't always turn out well. The demise of Batista gave us Castro in Cuba. The demise of Somoza gave us Ortega in Nicaragua. So just when you think it can't get worse, it can get worse. So are we going in with, to the extent we are, going in with eyes wide open as it pertains to Guaido and the people around him?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, Guaido, whatever his political coloration, is far better than Maduro and the pro-communist, pro-Russian, pro-Chinese communist people behind Maduro. So it's definitely an improvement. And again, the people of Venezuela are the ones that are being called on to do mass rallies to try and oust this regime. And at a certain point, we're hoping that there'll be a tipping point in the military, as you mentioned, that the military will come over. Maduro yesterday had a big meeting where he was photographed with a lot of the top military leaders sitting around the table. So it's not clear that the military is ready to fracture, although it appears that some of the military have supported Guaido.
There was a report, too, and, these reports are always sometimes competing propaganda, so I wonder how you receive them as an expert in the space. A report that some inner circle members of some of the members of Maduro's inner circle, had met with opposition leaders to talk about expediting Maduro's exit, and that this is consistent with what Pompeo said about an airplane at the tarmac, and he was ready to go, and then it fell apart because the Russians invade against it, I guess. Do you think it's that close, that it's teetering so much so that a little bit more American influence could push it into Guaido's direction?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm pretty sure that Pompeo wouldn't have said what he said about the Russians convincing Maduro not to leave is accurate or based on some solid intelligence. But I know that they've been having lots of talks with Guaido and Guaido's people on both sides, from the Venezuelan side as well as the U.S. side, again, to try and build him up and trying to get that momentum so that they reach that tipping point. And then the military said, hey, we can't be running over the Venezuelan people anymore with armored vehicles, and that they'll give the guy an option. Hey, leave the country or face the firing squad.
So one of your other areas of expertise, obviously cyber warfare. What has been your kind of landing place in light of the Mueller report and Russian interference and what that sort of illuminated for American voters? Are we doing enough to combat covert information warfare?
No, we're not. I mean, it's a real challenge. We have Cyber Command and we have the National Security Agency, and they have two different missions, and they're both very much conjoined right now. They're trying to separate out Cyber Command, but the real expertise in our cyber is in NSA, because they've been doing cyber penetrations for several decades now, and their culture is, well, we don't want to attack any of these people that are attacking us through cyber because we're stealing their secrets. Whereas Cyber Command is saying, hey, it's time to send a message to develop deterrence in the cyber realm by going after some of the equipment or the information that has been stolen from us, or the people that have stolen it or conducted these operations, like the Russian GRU, which is the expertise there, as well as the Chinese, which have engaged in massive, 500 billion annually in stolen American technology. Until they take that step where they really let the other side know that there's a cost to stealing our information, to breaking into our computers, it's not really going to deter any. They're just going to continue to attack us in the cyber realm.
Former CIA Director John Brennan was on MSNBC. Where else would he be? Talking about the deep state and decrying President Trump's suggestion that there was an effort by intelligence officers and law enforcement to overturn the 2016 election and so forth. Is President Trump taking it too far when he says effectively there was an effort to stage a coup d'etat by the deep state?
Well, I think it's worth investigating that. There really hasn't been an investigation of the activities behind the FBI's counterintelligence investigation of President Trump and his campaign. And we know that they misused the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court by using a Democratic Party-funded dossier to conduct surveillance on the campaign. And that really hasn't been, Devin Nunes, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, uncovered that, and it was really incumbent upon him to launch that investigation, but instead it was sidetracked into focusing on what the Russians were doing and this whole narrative that there was this false narrative, as we now know from the Mueller report, that there was this collusion effort during the 2016 campaign between Russia and the Trump campaign. The real scandal is that there was a misuse. There was a small group of FBI people and Justice Department people who were engaged in what appears to be political spying. Whether that amounted to an attempted coup, we really don't know because they haven't fully investigated it either in Congress or with some special counsel.
What about the intelligence people? How do you think John Brennan and James Clapper in particular have afforded themselves throughout the 2-year investigation?
Well, Brennan, and Clapper both just became political hacks. I did a piece for the Free Beacon recently. It was based on a journal article which said that the CIA in particular had become a politicized entity, basically a liberal left organization culturally that was really undermining its mission of providing objective, independent intelligence to policymakers.
What was your takeaway from Bill Barr's testimony yesterday?
Well, he's definitely a pro. They tried to challenge him on a number of fronts, and I think he really comported himself well in basically stating the case. He defended his letter to Congress on the findings of the Mueller report before it was released, and he obviously knew there would be great pressure to release it, and it was. And he said basically this was the verdict, and people asked for the details of the case, and we got the details of the case when the report was released. But that didn't seem to satisfy the Democrats very well, and I think the Republicans did a good job of defending him and the Trump administration.
He is Bill Gertz, senior editor for the Washington Free Beacon, author of the book I War, War and Peace in the Information Age, and he's got a column up about U.S. intelligence and the question of whether they are institutionally politicized towards Democrats. I think his comments about Clapper and Brennan may be a leading indicator of his opinion. Bill, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560.